Welcome, everyone, to the Project Mercury Alumni Association Spotlight. I'm Paul Ellis, one of the alumni board members. I have with me today Cameron Olsen, one of the Project Mercury graduates and alumni. Before I talk about it and kind of destroy everything he's done during his time in the Project Mercury world, I actually turn it over to you, Cameron, to do a little introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Cameron. I went through Project Mercury. We initially worked on a kit called Raise a Jet Power. It's a solar generator. From there, I worked with another team. We developed a blood transfusion technology for the Air Force. With a couple other cool folks called Project Lavoie, and done a whole bunch of little other side projects in that. But those are the two big ones I would talk about.
Cool. So you went through Project Mercury. So you said at first you went through an innovation workshop. Did you move on and take the 12-week course? And if you did, how was that jump week start? And was there anything like you're like, holy mackerel, stood out to you and made you go to, am I in the right space or crap, I'm in the wrong spot?
So we had a really untraditional onboarding for the full 12 weeks. We flew out to a country in the Pacific. So we joined with some people out there that were doing a kind of a leadership commander's course for them, but for us it was our onboarding. So rather than logging in remotely and doing those exercises digitally, we did them in person with some other counterparts out there in person. It's pretty cool. We had Jeff DeGraff out there who was kind of running us through it. Speaking really quickly, we're drinking out of a fire hose to keep up with him. He's a very smart individual.
No, 100%. So that I think you're referring to the Singaporean Air Force, who actually were the cohorts they have still going on to this day with Project Mercury. What was kind of like your aha moment when you said that drinking from a fire hose? At what point did it finally click during the course?
So it started out very not like for me like when I think of problems, it's find the solution quickly and implement it. And so spending an entire week of pulling apart the problem from every aspect to every part it touches, to from the 50-foot view, the 1,000-foot view, how big is this problem? How much of it is solvable? It took me probably 2 or 3 weeks going through it to figure out all of that had a purpose. And it was so that I was well informed and I could chase down leads, and I knew which portion of the problem I'm best suited, or a team was best suited to actually tackle. It's hard to rack my brain around the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's kind of interesting because that's kind of like watching the weather, which we're talked about, and staying well with the problem. I mean, you mentioned being in the Pacific Theater, and the weather changes dramatically there all the time. It could be rain, it could be darkness. You have typhoons, no typhoons. But post your Project Mercury course, what kind of like jobs or areas of expertise opened up to you that probably weren't there before that you were greatly appreciated and attribute to Project Mercury? What happened there?
So fortunately, we had a lot of success. I was able to I was kind of looked at in the more of an advisory capacity for things that might impact the Air Force at maybe beyond a tactical level, maybe a little bit things in the operational level. Additionally, the Project Mercury, you're forced to do a lot of public speaking, and you're forced to do things in, quite frankly, layman's terms. And so I was able to speak to a lot of more people on a lot more broad of subjects. So I was put into a lot of positions where I was briefing some pretty important people. At one point, I briefed the Secretary of the Air Force, and I attribute Project Mercury probably to that because I was more articulate, more informed on larger things going on.
No, that's pretty neat that you guys speak to the Secretary of the Air Force on a Project Mercury, on a project you're working on. Now, would you say that the Project Mercury, all the reaching out to the stakeholders, getting to those yes and those no's that we always end up they talk about in the course, and doing these bar fights, did that enhance your public speaking? Is that what your one area that Project Mercury kind of improve upon as a member in the innovation space?
I would say 100%. I was put in front of a lot of pretty high-ranking people quite often, and so being put in that spotlight and speaking regularly definitely made me a lot more comfortable public speaking. So, for example, like Raise a Jet Power, that project got picked up by Headquarters Air Force, And so at Logistics Officers Association, they showcase, 6 of their top projects for the year. Our project was selected for it, and I had to speak in front of 300 people, I would guesstimate, and many of them were general officers.
So we talked through the Project Mercury course. You said speaking through Air Force Logistics Association, if I recall right, you were also with Shogun Spark with Nestle at Kadena, which is where Raise to Jet Power came from. Are there any opportunities or exposures you had that you kind of, I would, as we talk in innovation space, eating some failure cake? Were there any slices you had to eat, or did you end up eating the whole cake in itself?
What do you mean? Like for failures we had to take on, or?
Yes, any type of failures or things you walked into like, yep, that's not going to work, or man, I totally botched this area type of approach.
100%. I would say 90% of innovation is people telling you no. It's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of no's. And sometimes you're stepping on toes that you didn't even know existed. So a lot of learning your lefts and rights, who controls what programs go where requirements in general come from. So you're getting your head kicked in and from a lot of directions. So all you can really do is just keep pivoting and keep turning and keep seeing where you can come out from it.
No, that's perfect. Now, you mentioned earlier about Shogun Spark being raised to jet power. You also mentioned the blood program like that. And if I recall right, you're not medical, you work in the logistical world. So how has Project Mercury allowed you to attack the logistical readiness world differently than you were before the course?
So a lot of that I was initially brought in on from Jet, and it was partially because I am completely foreign, like you said, to the medical world. And so a lot of what I was doing is asking a lot of questions to be partially, devil's advocate, but also to try and turn the language to where any outsider could understand what was being said. And then a portion of it at the end of it was to essentially take the Air Force's money that they were willing to give us and put it towards something that you can put in your hands and train with.
No, that's pretty cool. Have you taken any of this approach? Like you said, you were the outsider, I would say devil's advocate, because you knew nothing about medical. Now that you're back in the logistical world full time, are you taking that same approach, bringing people who are outside, I would say outside thinkers, bringing them into your team, looking at those athletes that are out there, or the creative thinkers, all the different aspects that we look at when we come to the iGenome of Project Mercury Innovatrium? Have you been utilizing a lot of that to build your teams, tackling problems where you're at?
I try to as much as I can. So I call it talent management, just locally within my work area. But I try to figure out how people think, and I try to bring them to where they're best suited for those contributions where applicable. As often as I can, I try to bring outside people, just because we get very stuck in our lingo and language and our processes, and bringing people to just have no idea what's going on, or maybe they just think a certain way into discussions, often leads us to other paths that are, in my opinion, more successful in the long run.
No, I think you're currently at Travis Air Force Base, and I do recall a Phoenix Spark is sitting there. Are you leveraging the Innovation Work Center and to get after things? On top of that, do you still keep in contact with the Project Mercury alumni and cohorts and leverage them to tackle problems within that whole ecosystem of innovators? As we all know, if you don't use the ecosystem, it kind of dies. Do you use that on a constant basis here and there? I know you talk to Jet quite a bit, but how is that going along for you?
So I mostly stay in contact with you, Jeff, John, and then Jet. Honestly, as friends, but also in the capacities where maybe we heard something from somewhere else, we can give our contributions. So in the capacity I'm in here at Travis, there isn't a whole lot of room or area for me to leverage those things and contribute. So unfortunately, fallen off a bit.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Life happens. We move around. There's only so much bandwidth we have. We can't expand our network to be 1 terabyte when we're human, right? So if you look back on the Project Mercury, you mentioned that you were at the Air Force Logistics Association. You did the Secretary of the Air Force. What is in your seat looking back on your time in Project Mercury? What do you feel the legacy of the Project Mercury system on the Air Force, or back then it would be DoD, which is called DOW now, our NATO allies in Singapore? What do you feel is the Project Mercury legacy, and how has it impacted, I would say, the innovation space?
So I would probably say that having that foundation of using process improvement tools to force us to go outside of our networks and build networks and ask questions and bring in stakeholders, I would say those two things are probably going to have a lasting impact on everyone that was involved with the process. Mostly because a lot of times we just tend to keep to ourselves, or we tend to have that mindset initially of, well, here's a problem, let's find the solution right now and implement it, even though we might be doing things that, it's a causation correlation type deal. Causation doesn't necessarily mean correlation. Or sorry, say that backwards. Correlation is not causation.
Project Mercury, man. You can change it however you want, right? It's a paper napkin fight. Let's go for it.
Bring some
flip that napkin over and rewrite it. So you mentioned earlier on that a lot of times, because you were in Shogun's Park with Jet, he would pull you to these different groups, and you just said, "Hey, let's go." If you could go back and talk to Cameron now, off the knowledge that you have now, what would you say to a Cameron who's out there right now listening to this podcast, who's an innovator, who wants to make a difference? What would you tell them? Because, like I said earlier, a lot of people think that innovators are the ones who are creating the widget, who are the ones that are coming up with this brand new aha moment. What would you tell someone that's a Cameron from the out there that's listening?
I would say probably do your homework. A lot of times we get stuck in what this cool thing can do, but we have to be able to communicate it to somebody who has the power and authority to actually do it or implement it or buy it. So if we're not messaging that correctly, if we're not well informed on maybe what their priorities are, what their problems are, we can't draw those connections. It kind of leads you down a dark path of maybe no success, or you can't figure out why, you have this great thing and you're getting a lot of support laterally. How do we get sponsors on this thing? It's doing that homework early, reading news, watching the weather. It's trying to pull in as much as you can to try and relay that information in a way that's useful to whoever you're speaking to.
I appreciate that insight. It's always hard to think back. What would I tell myself 5 years ago? Because I can't remember how myself was thinking 5 years ago. So I really appreciate this conversation and the insight on how things approach for you. I definitely can say, from working with you on Project Lavoie and other projects at Shogun Spark, I really appreciate what you did for the Air Force, what you've done for Project Mercury, and the innovation space not only in the Kadena airspace that we have control over, but the Air Force and the Department of War altogether. Because what you touched with the raise of jet power, Project Mercury, and Project Lavoie, I would say also Kinetic Cargo is another one that's out there that you were tied to. Your impact is going to be felt for years to come, and I honestly don't think you truly see that. You were just being Cameron, taking things and getting it done and being part of the team because it would need to get done. So I really appreciate you giving time to talk about this. Is there anything last shot across the bow, last thought that's coming out of the brain of Cameron that you would like to share with the team, with anybody that's listening?
No, I mean, I know I'm not heavily invested in this stuff as much as I'd like to be, but I mean, my phone's still open, my email's still open. I love to think about and see these cool things that are going out there. I'd love to give my input if anybody wants it, and just want to say thank you for having me on here. It's an honor.
Hey, thanks again, Cameron, for giving time, and especially out in Cali, and I'm sitting here in Arkansas. So once again, thanks for doing it and everything, and keep being you and stay in touch.
Yep, will do. Thank you.